My name's Richard Kingston. I'm a member of staff here at the University. I'm Professor of Urban Planning and Geographic Information Science. And I think the reason I'm standing up here is I lead the Cities and Environment theme for Digital Futures. Another bit of my job is running a big research programme for NERC, Natural Environment Research Council, called the Digital Solutions Programme. So there's been a thread in all of this around digital and visualisation. Anyway, before we get on to the interesting discussion, I have to do the usual housekeeping stuff. I'm told there is no, well, you can read it on there is no fire alarm planned. Apparently it's only planned on a Friday. If the fire alarm does go off, head out the way that we came in or follow the usual kind of fire exit routes. We do then congregate on the car park D. It'd be useful if I knew where car park D was. It's not on this map. But I assume it's the multi-storey car park around the back here. Yeah, so just head out, usual stuff. The event is being recorded and filmed, so the usual things with that. If you don't want to be your face shown or your voice recorded, let Kitty know, who's waving her arm at the back. Yeah, but hopefully we'll be able to stay in here and not have to go out and stand outside in the very cold weather. So in terms of digital futures, for those of you who don't know, digital futures, if you're not been to an event before, this is a cross-university initiative. It's been going for 5 or 6 years now. We have a series of verticals, sort of thematic areas. As I said, I lead the Cities and Environment one, and we've got others. And then we've got what we call our cross-cutting capabilities, more sort of methodologically driven, whether it's about data science and AI, trust and security. So a whole range of things, and some of us work in particular areas. You can probably place a lot of academics here at the university into one of these nodes on that grid, and you can find out lots more on Digital Futures at Manchester's website. So it's not really for me to hog the limelight here. I'm going to hand over now to Megan from the digital team at Manchester City Council, and Megan will say more about what's happening this afternoon.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Hopefully you can all hear me. Just wave if that's not the case. My voice doesn't necessarily travel, so I'm relying on the microphone today to help me a bit with that. But firstly, thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see such a turnout, and we've really enjoyed kind of engaging with the research community over the past kind of year and a half that we've been operational for strategy. So it's great to see some familiar faces, but if you're new to the world of the Manchester Digital Strategy, then welcome, and we're really kind of interested to kind of hear some of the thoughts that are going to come out of today. So, again, if you're not familiar with the Manchester Digital Strategy, I'm going to give you a really brief overview of what exactly it is. So I want to take you back to 2019, and that was when the Manchester Digital Strategy was written, so pre-pandemic. Pandemic happened and we were like, okay, we really need a digital strategy now. We're facing multiple challenges in the city, primarily a question of digital inclusion. So we were like, we need a digital strategy now so that we can help our residents and make the city a digitally enabled one. So we've been operational as a project team since about 2022 to deliver what's in the digital strategy. And what is in the digital strategy, you may ask? Well, we cover 4 different themes. Remarkable people, that's about ensuring that residents are digitally skilled, that access to digital in the city is kind of inclusive and equitable and available to all as well. We'll look at connected places. So you could kind of consider this your more traditional smart cities projects where we're looking at digital infrastructure. How do you make sure that the city as a whole is really well connected so that businesses can thrive here, but also that people can get online when and wherever they want. We also look at pioneering the future and prosperity for all. So that's looking at our digital economy, the different sectors that work in digital across the city, and to make sure that they're thriving, but also that we're looking at our digital economy in a bit more of a mindful way. So if you're a big tech business coming to Manchester, how are you also kind of playing your part in making the city a better place too? So there's a bit of like a social innovation aspect to that theme as well. And then finally, we look at rising to challenges and future-proofing our city. And the name of the game with this really is about sustainability, which is hopefully something that we're going to get in a bit today. So that's how can we use digital technologies to both enable a zero carbon transition, but also how do we look at digital and the carbon cost of it itself, and how do we be a bit more innovative with how we use digital so that we're not creating more problems down the line for ourselves than we already think we are. So that's the digital strategy. We've got a new project plan refreshed for 2024, which has way less than 26 projects, so we can do things properly and do them right, which is one of the reasons why we've got all you guys and your brains in the room today to help us think about digital twins and visualization and how we can do something like that right. So the fundamental kind of thing behind the Manchester digital strategy is that societal challenges are digital challenges, and we believe it's also vice versa. So in Manchester, there's not just 9 challenges facing the city at the moment, but this is a selection of some of the things that we're thinking about as a local authority. So, you know, there's multi kind of ways you can look at some of these different things. So enabling active travel, that might have a digital element to that particular challenge, but there's also a people element and a very kind of analogue element to those things as well. Likewise, we're looking at inequality, really high levels of kind of poverty and exclusion in Manchester, so we need to address those now. And then finally, kind of looking at things like physical infrastructure and how can we plan for that, so in the future we don't need to dig up your road on your street like more than once in order to get kind of good connectivity. So these challenges are very multifaceted, and in some cases digital can be an enabler and help reach a solution, but in other cases digital can be more of a blocker and a barrier, for example with inequality and digital exclusion, as I mentioned. So it's important that we think about digital with that dual lens of, yeah, it's great, it's brilliant, but also we need to focus on people and what we want to see in the city. So if I've not hammered this home enough, we come at this from a solutions-based approach. So what's the society we want to see? What's that ultimate outcome? And then we work back from that and think, okay, what digital tool would help us to reach that, rather than just what's the shiniest tech project we can do in Manchester today. So that's really how we're thinking about digital and smart cities as a city council. So yeah, that's kind of hopefully giving you a bit of a flavour of what we look at. But you know, there'll be my contact details at the end, so please get in touch if any of those themes in particular are really interesting to you. We'd love to hear from you. And now, I suppose, into the meat and potatoes of why we're here today, which is digital twins or other ways of visualising a city and why that could be useful to us. Some of you might have thought, well, why isn't this event just focused on digital twins? The answer to that really is we're interested in other types of visualisation as well, for kind of like creative engagement with residents. So we know that digital twins aren't the only way to see or visualise a place. But why would they be useful to us? So a lot of this is kind of stating the obvious, but data-led decision making is key for us as a local authority. There's much less risk if we're doing things digitally and less direct nosing into people's lives, although there is a caveat of that with kind of data collection and questions around that. There's also kind of really useful cases in planning. As I mentioned before, we don't want to continually have to be digging up the same areas in Manchester, so if we can do that digitally first and get it right, then we don't need to be causing undue disruption. And finally, and this is what I think excites me about digital twins and visualization, is that it's really about understanding what goes on in a place in reality and not just kind of looking at our assumptions of what a particular place might be like. So I think that's a really cool and kind of key aspect that we're interested in. And then in terms of some of the opportunities for digital twins or visualization, and hopefully we'll kind of crowdsource some more of these later on in the workshop. Citizen engagement, as I've mentioned, a lot of consultation is done in kind of a bit of a bog standard way where, you know, a couple of council officers will go to a particular neighbourhood, sit down and wait for people to come to say what they think about a particular project happening in their area. So is there a bit more of an engagement where we can do that with digital tools to people have a bit more understanding of what that change is going to make in their area and what does that look like? So that's a really big opportunity. Obviously building better public spaces is huge. Addressing different factors of inequality. I'm really interested in how we layer like different types of data to understand some of these like more nuanced and holistic issues. So I think that's really interesting. And also, of course, kind of mitigating the impact of climate-related emergencies as well. So the breadth and opportunity really is huge, and I think there's a lot to get excited about, but also there are huge challenges, and I've had a sneak peek at Grant's presentation later, and he does a good job of kind of explaining it, you know, what's really going on. So I think there's a few main ones for us when it comes to digital twins and visualising, which are kind of key barriers to us doing some of this stuff. So cost is the first one. We know that depending on the size of them and the data that they need to work, they can be incredibly costly, and in a time of kind of limited local authority budgets, how do we make the business case for that? Similarly to cost, there's a question around both like data management, data governance, and also data security. So how do you make sure that we're not, creating some kind of digital twin that could then be used to identify resident X, resident Y? How do we make sure that we manage that data and keep it up to date so it remains useful? I think thirdly, who owns that digital twin? So we're limited on resource, so how do we make sure that this thing that we build doesn't just kind of sit in a digital cupboard gathering dust? How do we make sure that we're using that and that it's useful and it's not just kind of done but continues to be sustainable? And then finally, and I think this is maybe something that's not thought about as often, is adoption for kind of non-digital enthusiasts. I was explaining to a family member about this because they were kind of asking, well, what would you use a digital twin for in a council? Like, I don't understand. So essentially it would be like if you had a digital twin to explain, I don't know, where bin collections aren't picked up on a regular basis. Someone in your waste management team is going to have to deal with that data to make the decisions to understand why that's happening and then do something to resolve it. But that person might not be a digital person, they might not be open to new technologies and using them. So we have to look at adoption and how we get people on board with using different technologies if we're going to do this. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour about where we're at and where we're thinking of digital twins and visualisation and all of that. But the purpose of today really is to spark some ideas, form some connections with each other, and think about how we can work together, because I know it's tricky sometimes to kind of line up those different timelines between research, private sector, public sector. We don't really mesh sometimes. So I think if we can solve that, that would be great. I don't think that's going to happen this afternoon, but it's interesting to think about and just come to the table and say, we know we want to work together, there are challenges, but how do we do that? So, I'm going to pass over to Grant. Kitty, do you mind just having a technical issue? It's always the way when you have a digital in the title of your event. Things will go wrong. Oh no. Never mind. We have Grant's slides, so that's great. So I'm going to pass over to Grant. I've had a look at this presentation. It's really interesting, so I'm really excited to hear about what you have to say. So.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invite, first and foremost, to come and talk through a little bit of some of the work that is feeding into a project at the Birmingham, or the geographical area of Birmingham, called the Diatomic Project. My background is, and my details are here, the slides will be made available. If anybody's got any queries or questions after the event, post-event, please feel free to email me. I was saying to Richard earlier on, I've sort of latterly come into, let's call it digital twin environment. It's more from I come from a modelling environment, forecasting, time series analysis environment, and particularly with a focus on energy data. So I'm pretty aware over the uncertainties that belie and underpin energy data in particular, and also the built environment, which drives a lot of the energy use as well. And that's before we even get into sort of socioeconomic uncertainties, home ownership uncertainties, etc., etc. So I think coming from that background, but also with an interest in visualization, seems to be quite an interesting, I bring a degree of skepticism, let's say. I would say it's healthy. Some of my colleagues might say it's a little bit unwarranted, but there we are. One of the things we'll have a look at, the Diatomic Project, 2-year research and delivery program, and it's got a 300k budget for a digital twin platform to accommodate 3 distinct areas. So it's quite an unusual project. It's got the University of Birmingham. We're sort of delivering the process of appointing who's going to deliver the digital twin platform. We've been very keen with experience we've gone through effectively to try and keep this as open as possible. So even in the tender bid, to make sure that what might have developed throughout this project was not a proprietary system, effectively to try and keep that as open as we can. So ultimately what we're looking at doing is the contractor's been appointed now, we're just sort of ramping up through Q1, and it's going to be using cloud platforms, so Microsoft Azure platform, effectively, for a whole bunch of different things to get data ingested, data visualization, and for 3 distinct areas. So it's really interesting as well. It's been quite an interesting conversation and journey with Birmingham City University. We're looking at air quality for a different geographical area than myself and my group are looking at in terms of East Birmingham. So there's an area called Tynesley Environmental Energy District, which we'll come on to in a little bit, and subject to some previous work that we have done. Aston University are looking at fuel cell performance and degradation, so there's no specific geography around that. And that's more, I say, that's more sort of, I guess, a typical sort of engineering digital twin to see whether or not that's going to help in terms of deliver some decision making, some insights for that particular application as well. But the air quality and the energy system analysis effectively of areas of East Birmingham and the clean air zone, I guess it's fair to say those are firmly in the sort of data viz element as well, as to see how far we might be able to push that. So we'll have a quick look about what's happened. Previous work included an Alan Turing Institute funded project. I should mention a previous Turing Institute fellow. And my background, sorry, I lead the Energy Systems and Data Group at the University of Birmingham under the Birmingham Energy Institute. And this is subject to some sort of deeper insights we did for a previous project. It's an area, I'll just go to the next slide. So this is Birmingham. An area of East Birmingham here, effectively, is this particular part of Birmingham. There's very few sort of residential parts of this area. It's just these different coloured ones, and what we found, there's an awful lot of commercial, non-domestic buildings in that space. Now that, if I cover back to it, I'll look back to it towards the end of the presentation, but that itself brought up some challenges, effectively, in terms of data that we're able to look at. Yeah, some of these slides from an organisation called MAA Digital from Newcastle. Really great to work with them, Colin Kelly and the team. helped basically to deliver this particular project in terms of a data visualization, a digital twin, digital twin, high definition of the particular area. Some general points that we sort of found out: 3D photorealistics become easier and lower cost to use as background layers. It opens up opportunities for blending different types of data that feed into it. They might be static data sets, which are quite useful. You might even get, depending on the monitoring, you might even get sort of closer to real-time type of visualization along that as well. Two initial use cases aiming to be grounded in 3D space in the Diatomic project are the air quality and energy systems, probably initially using EPC certificate data, and anybody who's worked with that knows the uncertainties around that, but nonetheless, we're looking to use that initially. Research approaches to extend 2D mapping, so ArcGIS, everybody's probably used to, into a 3D environment. You know, and some interesting questions around that. How easy is it to do? What are the challenges? What are the benefits? What's the additional value of taking it to that further step? And different use cases could then be added. So I think, you know, it's to build knowledge around, get that knowledge out, so that if different data sets become available, there's a way of trying to incorporate them. Because, you know, we don't have all the answers. We don't have all the questions that we think we want to try and answer with this. It will evolve. And mainly focused at an interactive display level with potential for decision tool making as well, or decision support as a particular tool in providing insights. I'm a fantastic believer in static visualization. It gives you a certain level of insights, but if you allow people to interact with it and ask their own questions, that provides far more as well. Just going on with that. Part of this was in terms of drone capture. This was originally supposed to happen in January of 2023, and then the Civil Aviation Authority changed the rules, and therefore we couldn't do drone capture over residential buildings. So it then had to go and pivot pretty quickly to using a low aircraft. All these details are on the slide, so please, you'll see them after. Ground control points, very, very important, effectively, to make sure that everything is locked, geolocated. 100 megabyte images, and then 1,600 of them, so a pretty chunky amount of actual raw data that Colin and his team then chewed through. Model creation, all of this is effectively leading to a very high definition interactive skin, 3D skin of this particular area, effectively. Now I'm going to see if I can actually bring this up. Yep, so effectively this is the area that's been covered. So you can zoom around, you're used to a Mac, effectively. But you can see it's a digitized layer. This is one of the biggest buildings in the whole place, effectively. And if I zoom in, because we're going to zoom in on something else in a minute, this particular building and this particular focus. So when this all came out around about the summer, it'll take a little time to blend in and get a bit better, hopefully, if it is connected. The resolution is much, much better than that. It's not working. Digital events, but there we are. If it does kick in, it is a very, very high digitized 3D skin, and that's fantastic for certain things that you might wish to do. Don't think it is going to behave. But, and this is quite an interesting thing, that's that same building. I don't know if you noticed, but clearly the area that was very expensive to do because of drone scanning, localized, it was a one-off, effectively. It was bounded by a certain geographical area. So when you look at going to the side of it, it just stops, okay? Subsequently, just around about the same time, so this is May-ish last year, Google released its 3D photorealistic tiles, okay? That's how good it is for that particular building, same building in Tyseley in East Birmingham, except that this is not limited to a particular area of East Birmingham. This can be, I'm just going to see if I can do, and very quickly see if we can find this particular building in Manchester. Okay, now this clearly is not limited, so there we are. We're somewhere in this particular building here. So it's great if I find the right keys, which I can't, to move around. No, not quite. As I said, I'm more used to Macs than PCs. This then starts to make life really scalable, really quite interesting, right? But we only found that out after we'd spent the time and effort doing the high level Vis. So there are some differences. I think it is fair to say with the project that happened earlier last year, we've also got a very high definition point cloud. Now that could be useful for other things in terms of solar assessment, for example, or vegetation or tree cover, or things like that as well. So it's not quite the same type of data, but nonetheless, it's not scalable, really, in that sense. So flipping on from that, the timing now for the diatomic project to make things more scalable, we will be looking at using the data and leveraging the data from Google, so Google's 3D photorealistic tiles. So this is actually through the Unreal Engine, effectively, in terms of high def outputs from the actual project itself, and just a couple of these. And it's super detailed, super interesting, and it feels like a video game, right? It feels like you're in that sort of environment effectively to be able to zoom around and muck about with it. We did look at cesium. One of the things we separately did actually was myself and Joe Day, who's in the research group, we provided some synthetic data for particular areas of this East Birmingham, and then MEA Digital took that and actually badged them onto a 3D interactive thing that we're trying to get. It's not through the web, unfortunately. It's tied to either an iOS platform, which we've had difficulties with, so we're getting it onto ported across to a Android platform. But that is just a kind of looking a little bit over the horizon. What are the types of things that you might do? So if you were interacting with this, you'd see that all blended in really nicely. You could click on particular buildings and it would pull up data that says this is what we think the energy demand for that building would be. So that's for the diatomic project. We're going to see how far we can extend that further on. And these are these types of things. So in terms of interactivity, in terms of other things in that ability to provide sort of decision makers, but if this is online, it clearly, the first thing that we would all do is go and find our own property or property that we knew of, and we click on it and we see what data was available, and we might feel a range of things at that point as to thinking, is this, even though it's synthetic data, how accurate is it? Okay, and how far can we push that? Now that's an interesting ongoing issue anyway. I'm just going to have a quick bit of time. Yeah. So lessons from digital twin visualization, expensive but high quality, gave a detailed point cloud I mentioned, but we are going to look at diatomic using Focus Google 3D. So even though our area is covered by that particular digital twin anyway, I think to make it more scalable, certainly across Birmingham city area, is to look at using these 3D photorealistic tiles. Interestingly, if people have used Mapbox before, I believe it's a skin that you can just pull into Mapbox, and that makes it quite interesting from a visualization perspective, but it still leaves a few sort of queries and nuts and bolts things to do. So our next challenge is looking at a unique identifier for each building. And many people who work with building data probably say, okay, but why don't you just use a UPRN, because that's the whole basis for them to have a unique property reference number. And this is looping back to looking at the non-commercial buildings in that area of East Birmingham. So if I go back to here to give you a sense of scale, so all the buildings in that area, if you imagine the floor space, building plan floor space, so Ordnance Survey have the actual building footprints for all the buildings in that area. What we found was under the domestic side, there was near 100% coverage. Let's just say 100% coverage, fantastic. Under the non-domestic side, we were actually looking at how much heat does this area have, and therefore basing on floor space, we needed to know that and then build up some volume basis. I think it was 40% of the floor space in that area was not covered by a UPRN. Okay, so that was a big surprise to me personally, and therefore we started to use Ordnance Survey TOIDS as a unique identifier. Now that gets you some of the way there, but there's still a challenge with that. Okay. Anyway, so if you are looking at using UPRNs, they are good, but just beware that actually they don't cover necessarily everything, and that tends to fall away, tends to get worse when you're looking at non-commercial buildings. So basic wireframe model, footprint and height to host that unique ID. Can you click on something on a visualization skin that then allows you to tag other data to it? Okay. So that's what we're going to try and do next, is to find a way of doing that. So we started to look at using TOIDS from a Manchester City Council or any local authority basis. I believe they're covered anyway. They can use the TOIDS, they can use the building footprint data under the public sector geospatial agreement with Ordnance Survey. As researchers at any university, I believe equally we can approach Ordnance Survey, as we've done for previous projects, and get a specific license agreement to do research using those. However, sharing building footprints online or height data to make rudimentary 3D clickable shapes seems to have a commercial license agreement underpinning it. So basically, even what we found in a previous project, even derived data that we were working out, building footprint data, and then saying, okay, we want to share it with these other people that are part of this project, they themselves, even if we wanted to aggregate the data up, Ordnance Survey needed them to sign a particular agreement before we could even share that. Okay, so all I would say is check with Ordnance Survey. Okay, and that's me actually. Yeah.
Just on that final point. So if it's a research project, actually we can do that. We can use something called Digimap from Edinburgh University. That's how academics get OS data, and we are allowed to do it if it's a non-commercial project.
Even to share derived data?
Because that then is covered with, if you're working with that partner who's a public sector organisation, it's under their licence.
Yeah, sorry.
So in a if we're doing this as a collaborative research project, we can, there's ways around it. Our academic licence allows us to collaborate with you.
Yeah, so I'm glad you've raised that, Richard, because I didn't qualify that. So all local authorities are able to use it, but researchers can use it as well under an agreement or through Digimap. This is with third-party private sector companies who were also part of an innovative project. And we hit halfway into the project, even before I could share an Excel spreadsheet that was derived, I found that I couldn't. So that was a bit of a surprise in a 3-month project, which was under tight timelines as well. Anyway.
Can I just add
that
also, if you're a voluntary sector organisation or civil society organisation, you really get hit by them?
Yeah.
So
yeah. So again, Ordnance Survey have a role to do. They do have, I believe, still the best data for building footprint or most coverage, but there is a problem with innovation and allowing that to be. It would be far better for innovation, digital innovation right across the whole of GB if a lot of it was made more open. Now that's an ongoing conversation that Ordnance Survey need to have with the government body that own them. So we own Ordnance Survey through the government. It's not a private sector organisation. Anyway, it's another reason why I think this unique ID, so UCL did a lot of work, have done a lot of work, 3D stock model, that type of thing as well. But if there was, you know, a useful set of, it's just a basic wireframe model, you could click on things, it was geolocated, it had unique identifiers, that would be such a boon for lots and lots of different innovation and organizations across. So I think, look, we're minded to see where can we get it to with OpenStreetMap, where can we get it through, if there's stuff from Google and Bing. Bing we approached through this project previously, and you can't download stuff. You can have stuff online potentially, but you can't download stuff to then do further research. So it's an ongoing thing. Anyway, it might crop up in people's conversation. Should I mean, I've stopped the presentation. I don't know if there was time for Q&A.
I think we've got a little bit of flex time, so if anyone has any questions, we can take a couple.
Yeah.
And then we'll go to Angela.
Just wondered if you could give me a couple of examples of what it's going to be used for once you've made your digital twin. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of it is going forward.
Yep. So I can't. I wish I could. But it's a work in progress. Like I say, that's evolving. The way we're approaching it is to have Birmingham City Council as our client, i.e. in conversation with them, what could we do that would be useful for them? And there's a whole bunch of stuff. So there's stuff as an academic and my sort of areas of interest that I would love to do. But if that's of interest to me but not of interest to Birmingham City Council, then it's not. So I think where we're going to land initially for the energy side is more about, and this is across the sort of piece for many local authorities, the length and breadth of Great Britain. We know there's a massive retrofit challenge in terms of energy systems. We know that there's pots of money being made available, potentially, but if you have a limited amount of money, where best to spend that?
Yeah.
You know, can we provide some insights and information using the knowledge that we have that makes it easier for driving insights for people in Birmingham City Council or elsewhere to do that? So that's a likely thing. I think, are we going?
Yes. This
Yeah.
is all okay.
Grant, you know the Google 3D?
Yeah.
Is that a photo or is it a 3D model from a photo?
Ooh, that's a good question. So we've all been used to using StreetMap, I'm sure, for many, many years. So you can zoom into Google Maps.
That was a photo, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's video, but then it's
Yeah, video. But,
those cars with the 3D cameras on the roof.
yeah, but that new one, is that they've taken images and then they've built 3D models from the images?
So I think, not having gone into massive detail about it, I think part of it will be satellite, part of it will be the stuff they've got down at a local level from the cars, part of it will be from aircraft. I think they're probably dipped into just a whole bunch of different things, effectively, to get image data and then blend that together in a 3D form. Yeah. I mean, it seems that, you know, Birmingham, Manchester, for example, you would expect them to be pretty well covered, and it looks like they are. But I'm not sure it goes up to Durness, which is right on the top of Scotland, over to the west side. I haven't looked, actually, I should, to see how much detail there is there.
So my first question is similar. I'm interested in the questions you were trying to answer before you developed this. And then the second is, will the learning from this be kind of publicly available so that if we're doing something similar in Manchester, we can learn the lessons rather than suffer your pain?
Yes, so the second question is easier to answer than the first. So it's a definite yes. Okay? There is no point in other people going through similar sort of pain points or finding different challenges along the way. And as we all know, it is really useful to get different people's viewpoints from things, even when you're approaching challenges in the first place. So, yeah, absolutely. From a perspective of, again, it's a bit of an unusual project. Okay, there is the wider project, I think 6 million. 5 million of it is in terms of SME engagement and international engagement and stuff along those types of things, like business growth. Okay? Whereas the research side is about 1 million between ourselves, Birmingham City University, and Aston University as well, 300 of which is the digital twin sort of platform as well. So what questions are we looking at? How which ways we take it? Again, speaking from my own process, it is it's providing value to somebody, okay, not from an academic research perspective, although you know, we need to write things up so that other people can learn from it as well, that type of thing. My background, as I said, is in energy systems rather than air quality, for example, or traffic. So that's a sort of natural place for me to look at seeing if there are areas where there is interest in doing that. And that is within conversation with Birmingham City Council. So we've got actually another meeting with them planned for next week actually, to see about, you know, we'll probably put a whole bunch of different things on the table to say, look, would this be useful, would that be useful, and then see what they themselves feel in terms of what might be useful. The other thing I haven't mentioned is the local authorities themselves are very well used to working with sensitive data. Yeah, and have an enormous amount of really, really interesting data. Okay. As well. So, you know, we constantly find ourselves going, oh, we didn't know you had that. That's really useful. What could we do with that? So I think it's an iterative, evolving process. It doesn't quite answer your question,
no,
sorry.
But,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, unless there's any else, I think we'll move on to the next bit, but thank you very much, that was really...
No, pleasure.
Okay. No, I think everything's fine. That was really, really interesting. I think certainly from my perspective, it's really interesting to hear from someone that's doing the doing on those kinds of projects, and I think it certainly highlights an ongoing question in my mind of like, how do we connect up that like technologist expertise with, for all other people considered, people like myself who aren't necessarily from a technical background. So it's kind of comforting to hear that that's an ongoing conversation, but I thought that was great, so thank you very much, Grant.